The last person who saw Halima alive before I arrived was a nomad trader who passed through her region 18 months ago. He described her as a ghost, a woman so thin that her bones seemed to glow through her skin, living in a compound so silent that he initially thought it was abandoned. He offered to take her with him, to bring her to a village where she could receive food and water and human company. She refused. She told him she was waiting for someone, and she could not leave until that someone arrived. When I asked the trader who she was waiting for, he shook his head with a sadness that still haunts me. Her husband, he said. She is waiting for her husband. He died 22 years ago. This is the story of Halima, the woman who refused to stop waiting, the widow who built a life out of nothing but grief and hope, and the truth I discovered when I finally understood what she was really waiting for. It is not the story I expected to find. It is so much more. Halima was 17 years old when she married Youssef, a Bedouin trader twice her age with a reputation for kindness and a smile that could make the desert feel less lonely. Their marriage was arranged in the traditional fashion, negotiated by fathers who saw mutual benefit in uniting their families. Halima had never spoken to Youssef before their wedding day. She had glimpsed him once, from a distance, as he passed through her village on a trading expedition. She remembered thinking that he looked tired, and that his eyes seemed kind. They were married in a small ceremony attended by perhaps 30 people, the maximum their two families could gather in such a remote region. Halima wore her mother's wedding dress, altered hastily to fit her slender frame. Youssef wore a suit that he had purchased specifically for the occasion, the only suit he would ever own. They exchanged vows as the sun set over the dunes, and that night, in a tent pitched at the edge of her father's compound, Halima discovered that the man she had married was everything she had hoped for and more. He talked to me, she told me during one of our long conversations. That first night, when most men would have expected other things, Youssef sat across from me and asked me about my life, my hopes, my fears. He wanted to know who I was before he knew anything else. I fell in love with him in those hours. Not because he was handsome, though he was. Not because he was wealthy, though he was comfortable. But because he saw me as a person, not as a possession. In those days, that was rare. Perhaps it still is. They spent their first years together in constant motion, traveling with Youssef's trading caravan across routes that spanned thousands of kilometers. Halima learned to cook over campfires that had to be extinguished quickly to avoid detection by bandits. She learned to navigate by stars that she could now name as easily as she once named the streets of her childhood village. She learned to love the desert, its brutal beauty, its unforgiving honesty, its way of stripping away everything that was not essential. Most importantly, she learned to love Youssef with a depth that surprised her. He was not a demonstrative man. Public displays of affection were not common in their culture, but in private, he showed her tenderness that accumulated like sand in a dune, grain by grain becoming something massive and undeniable. He brought her small gifts from every town they visited. He learned her favorite foods and made sure they were always available. He listened when she spoke and remembered what she said, referencing conversations from months earlier as if they had happened that morning. "How do you remember these things?" she asked him once, genuinely puzzled. "Because you matter to me," he replied simply. "When someone matters, you pay attention. And when you pay attention, you remember." They never had children. This was a source of sorrow for both of them, though they rarely spoke of it. Halima knew that she was considered incomplete by the standards of her culture, a woman whose womb had failed its essential purpose. Youssef never once made her feel diminished by this. He refused offers from his family to take a second wife, a common solution to childlessness in their tradition. "I married Halima," he told anyone who suggested it. "I did not marry the idea of children. She is enough. She has always been enough." As they aged, the trading expeditions became shorter and less frequent. Youssef's health, never robust, began to decline. They settled permanently in a small compound that Youssef built with his own hands, located in a region remote enough to provide solitude but close enough to water sources to make life possible. It was not a grand home, 3 small rooms, a cooking area, a shaded space for their animals, but to Halima, it was paradise. For 12 years, they lived there together, watching the world change from a distance. News reached them occasionally, wars in distant countries, technologies they could not imagine, shifts in climate that seemed abstract until the droughts began affecting their own water supply. But mostly, they existed in their own small universe, content with each other's company, needing nothing that the wider world could offer. Youssef died on a Tuesday morning in late spring. Halima remembered this detail specifically, though she could not tell me the month or the year. She remembered that he had woken at dawn, complained of a headache, and asked her to bring him tea. She remembered making the tea exactly as he liked it, strong, with extra sugar, and carrying it to their sleeping room only to find him still and silent, his kind eyes finally closed, his chest no longer moving with breath. She did not scream. She did not cry. She sat beside him for hours, holding his hand, waiting for something that would not come. When the sun set that Tuesday evening, she finally accepted that he was gone. "I buried him myself," she told me, her voice steady despite the weight of the memory. "There was no one else to do it. I dug the grave with my hands because I did not have the strength for a shovel. It took me 3 days. My fingers bled. My back screamed with pain. But I buried him properly, facing Mecca, with prayers that I spoke through cracked lips. It was the last thing I could do for him. The last gift I could give." That was 22 years ago. Halima has not left the compound since. When I arrived at her home, guided by GPS coordinates that I had obtained from the nomad trader, I was not prepared for what I found. The compound was in a state of careful decay. Structures that should have collapsed years ago held together through constant, meticulous repair. The well still produced water, though barely enough for one person's minimal needs. The garden, if it could be called that, consisted of 3 scrawny plants that Halima tended with the devotion of a mother caring for sick children. And Halima herself was unlike anyone I had ever encountered. She was 73 years old, though she looked both older and younger than that number suggested. Her body was frail, reduced by years of inadequate nutrition to a frame that seemed impossibly delicate. But her mind was sharp, her wit was quick, and her eyes, the same eyes that had fallen in love with Youssef 56 years earlier, burned with an intelligence and awareness that defied her circumstances. "You are here to ask me why I stay," she said before I could introduce myself. "Everyone who comes asks the same question. The answer is always the same. I am waiting." "Waiting for what?" She smiled, a small, patient smile that held secrets I could not begin to guess. "When the time is right, I will tell you. For now, come inside. I have tea. You look like you need tea." I stayed with Halima for 9 days. My original plan had been to document her living conditions, collect whatever data would be useful for my research on isolated desert communities, and leave within 48 hours. But something about her drew me in, made me want to understand, made me need to hear her story. And so I stayed, sleeping on the floor of her modest home, helping with tasks that her aging body could no longer manage alone, listening as she shared a life that was at once heartbreaking and beautiful. Her daily routine was structured around the memory of Youssef. Each morning, she woke at the same time they used to wake together and performed her prayers on the same mat where they had prayed side by side for decades. She prepared breakfast, usually just bread and tea, and set out 2 portions, one for herself and one for Youssef. She ate hers slowly. His remained untouched until evening, when she would wrap the stale bread and add it to a storage container that she insisted was not waste but savings. "In case he is hungry when he returns," she explained, without irony or apparent delusion. After breakfast, she would visit Youssef's grave. This was located perhaps 50 meters from the main compound, marked by a simple stone that she had carved with his name and a verse from the Quran. She would sit beside it for exactly 1 hour, sometimes speaking aloud, sometimes sitting in silence, sometimes reading from a worn copy of poetry that Youssef had loved. When the hour was complete, she would kiss the stone and return to her home. The rest of her day was consumed by survival tasks: checking the well, tending the garden, making repairs to structures that were constantly being eroded by wind and sand, preparing her one real meal, eaten at midday during the brief window when the temperature was slightly less murderous, and always, always, looking toward the horizon as if expecting to see someone approaching. "I know he is not coming back," she admitted on my 3rd day with her. "I am not crazy. I know what death means. I watched him stop breathing. I buried his body with my own hands. But knowing something in your mind and feeling it in your heart are 2 different things. My mind knows he is gone. My heart is still waiting." Waiting for what, exactly? She considered the question carefully, searching for words that would convey something that perhaps could not be conveyed. "For the moment when I stop missing him," she said finally. "For the day when I wake up and the first thing I think about is not his face. For the time when I can eat a meal without automatically preparing his portion. I am waiting for the grief to end, I suppose. and it has not ended. So I continue to wait. And if it never ends, then I will wait forever. There are worse fates. At least this way, I am still connected to him. If I stop waiting, I lose even that. On the 5th day, a sandstorm forced us to shelter in the main structure for nearly 36 hours. The wind screamed around the walls, sand infiltrated every crack and seam, and the temperature inside climbed to almost 50 degrees despite the shade. Halima seemed entirely unconcerned, moving through her routines as if the apocalypse outside was merely an inconvenience. During those hours of confinement, she told me the stories that I had been waiting to hear. The story of how Yosef had once walked 70 kilometers to find a specific type of flower that Halima had mentioned admiring. The story of their first real argument, which had lasted 3 days and ended when Yosef had admitted fault even though he had been right, because being right was less important than being together. The story of the night when Yosef had held her through a fever so severe that she had been certain she would die, whispering reassurances until dawn broke and the crisis passed. He was not a perfect man, she said. No one is perfect. He could be stubborn. He sometimes forgot important things. He snored so loudly that I learned to fall asleep before him or not at all. But his imperfections made him real, and his love made everything else bearable. Do you ever regret not leaving after he died? Not going to a city, finding community, building a new life? She looked at me with something approaching pity. A new life? What would I do with a new life? I had one life, and it was spent with Yosef. When he died, that life ended. What I am doing now is not living a new life. It is completing the old one. There is a difference. Completing how? By being here. By maintaining the home we built together. By visiting his grave every day and keeping his memory alive. When I die, and I will die, probably soon, I will be buried beside him. Our bones will rest together for eternity, here in the place we chose, far from a world that would not understand us. That is completion. That is the ending our story deserves. On my 7th day with Halima, I made a discovery that changed everything I thought I understood about her life. I had noticed that she spent a portion of each evening writing in a journal, a battered notebook that she had been filling, page by page, for years. When I asked about it, she initially deflected, saying it was nothing important. But on that 7th evening, after we had shared a meal and the temperature had finally dropped to something bearable, she handed the journal to me. "Read it," she said. "You have been kind to me. You deserve to understand." The journal was not a diary in the traditional sense. It was a collection of letters, all of them addressed to Yosef, all of them describing the events of Halima's life since his death. She had written to him almost every day for 22 years, sharing the details of her existence, asking his advice on problems she faced, telling him how much she missed him and how much she still loved him. But it was the final entries that shattered me. In the most recent pages, Halima's handwriting had become shaky, her thoughts occasionally wandering in ways that suggested declining health. She wrote about physical symptoms, weakness, dizziness, a persistent pain in her chest that she had never mentioned to me. And she wrote about preparations, organizing her belongings, selecting the clothes she would be buried in, writing instructions for whoever found her body so that she could be placed in the grave she had already dug beside Yosef's. "You are dying," I said, looking up from the journal. It was not a question. She nodded. "I have been dying for months, perhaps longer. The body tells you when the end is approaching, if you know how to listen. I have listened, and I am ready. Let me take you to a hospital. There may be treatments." "No." Her voice was firm, final. "I will die here, beside my husband, in the home we built. This is what I have been waiting for, you see. Not for him to return. For me to join him. And now, finally, I am close enough to see the finish line." I stayed with her for 2 more days, arguing, pleading, offering solutions that she patiently rejected. She was not interested in prolonging her life. She was interested in completing it, on her terms, in the manner she had chosen. On the morning I left, she walked with me to my vehicle, a walk that exhausted her completely, though she refused to show it. We stood in silence for a long moment, the desert stretching endlessly around us, the sun already beginning its brutal assault. "Thank you for listening," she said. "Thank you for understanding, or at least for trying to understand. Most people would think I am crazy. Perhaps I am. But this is my life, and I have lived it as I chose. That is more than most people can say. Is there anything I can do for you? Anyone I should contact?" She shook her head. "Write my story. That is what you can do. Let people know that Halima existed, that she loved and was loved, that she spent 22 years waiting for an ending that finally came. Let them know that grief is not something to be rushed through or overcome. It is something to be honored. And let them know that somewhere in the Sahara, there are two graves side by side, where a husband and wife are finally reunited. That is the ending I want. That is the story I want told." I drove away with tears blurring my vision, glancing constantly in my rearview mirror until her figure disappeared into the heat shimmer. 3 weeks later, a nomad trader who passed through the region sent word that he had found her, peacefully deceased in a sleeping room, dressed in her best clothes, a smile on her weathered face. He buried her as she had instructed, beside Yosef, and marked the grave with a stone matching his. The journal was found among her belongings. In its final entry, written perhaps hours before her death, Halima had addressed not Yosef but whoever would eventually read her words. "To the one who finds this, I am not sad. I am not afraid. I am simply going home. Tell the world that love does not end with death. Tell them that waiting is not weakness. Tell them that Halima and Yosef are together again, and that the desert, which took so much from us, has finally given us something back. Eternal peace. Eternal companionship. An ending worthy of our beginning." If this story has moved you, if Halima's devotion has touched something deep within your heart, I hope you will carry her memory forward. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me about your own experiences with love and loss. And if you are lucky enough to have someone in your life who you love as Halima loved Yosef, do not wait for death to appreciate them. Tell them now. Show them now. Every single day. These stories remind us that the human heart is capable of devotion that defies logic, endurance that defies circumstance, and love that defies death itself. If you want to continue this journey with me, to hear more tales of extraordinary lives in extraordinary circumstances, I invite you to stay connected. There is so much more to discover about the hidden corners of our world and the remarkable people who inhabit them. Until next time, may your love be worthy of waiting for, and may you never have to wait alone.